Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. My name is Cory, and in today's episode, I'm going through a brief overview of how to play Invincible, the card game, and then also a quick initial impressions review of the game. Let's get started. Before we get started, as always, if you enjoy the content you see here on the channel, consider subscribing. We really appreciate it, and it helps us out a lot. With that, let's go down to the table and take a look at what Invincible, the card game, is all about. For any of you who have ever played Astro Knights or the other game Aeon's End, this will look very familiar because Invincible, the card game, shares most of the DNA with those games. With Astro Knights, I've never played Astro Knights, but from what I hear, it shares a lot of the same DNA. But I have played a lot of Aeon's End, and this game feels almost identical, but with the Invincible IP tagged onto it. So I really do enjoy the Invincible IP. I've watched all the seasons, all the episodes. I really enjoyed the show a lot. I have not read any of the comics, but the show is one of my favorites. My wife and I have watched everything, so I really do like the IP, and I love the Aeon's End game. So when they combined the IP with the Aeon's End system, this really got me excited to play it. And yeah, spoilers, I really do enjoy the game. Just right up front, I will say it that this game is fantastic. Invincible, the card game, it is a cooperative deck building game that you're trying to take down the big bad. Also, another thing that's really unique about Invincible that's a little bit different than the other Aeon's End and Astro Knight systems are that you actually have a campaign you can play through. I haven't opened any of the campaign booklets yet here, but you can see on the overhead, there is a packet number 2, 3, and 4 that as you play through the storyline and it progresses, you get to open these packets for additional content. I've only played with the basic content, so if you are worried about spoilers at all in this video, just know that this is all the base content that you start the very first game with, so there are no spoilers with this video. Also, in Invincible, it comes with a lot of the characters from the TV show. You've got Rexplode, Adam Eve, Robot, and Duplicate, and then obviously Invincible here as well. So all the main characters from the show that you know and love, you can play as those characters, and they all have a unique asymmetric power associated with their power-up track here as well. So that keeps things fresh and variable as you play. You can play this game as a true solo game, which is the only way I've played the game here so far, but it does play up to 4 players. So you and your teammates can work cooperatively to take down the big bad force. So how does the game work? Simply, like I said, it is a deck building game. You are adding cards from the supply to your deck to try to upgrade your deck to take down the minions and the big bad boss. If you can take down the big bad boss, as you can see here in my last game I played, take them down to 0 health. That's how you win the game. The Flaxens here, for example, start at 50 health. So that is where the dial would be set to begin the game. And then you just go through turns as normal, trying to add cards to your deck, attack the minions and attack the main bad boss. And they're going to be sending waves of enemies at you and attacking you back. And that's the general flow of play. How does it all work? Well, the first thing that I will go over is how turn order works in this game. It is a unique system compared to many other games, but it does share the same turn order system as Aeon's End. Like I said, if you're familiar with that game, this is identical, where the first thing you do on every turn is flip over a card, and it'll either be a player card or the villain card, and depending on what player number you are, that is whose turn it will be. In a solo game, obviously you're always player 1, so it would be my turn first. The way the player turn is broken down here is the first thing you can do is attack with any equipped weapons that you have above your player board. So in this example, I don't have any weapons equipped to my hero, so I cannot attack any of the minions or the big bad boss because I have no weapons equipped. But that is the first thing you could do, is attack with those weapons. The other thing you do on your turn is take a look at your hand, and you can play various different types of cards. As you can see here in the supply, you've got cards, everything from fuel to technology to more upgraded weapons. And essentially the first thing you want to know in this game is that any of the fuel cards, and looking at my hand here, I've, obviously the first 2 cards here are weapons, but here, for example, is a fuel card, and Our Last Hope is another fuel card. So anything with that purple text that purple text box on the bottom, that'll be your fuel cards. That's how you gain energy, and energy is the main system in this game where when you play energy down, you count up however many energy is on the cards. For example, in this one, Our Last Hope has an assist effect that says the active player gains 1 energy, and I am the active player, and then also gain 2 energy. So this is worth 3 energy just for this card, and then Determination is another additional energy. So I have a total of 4 energy to spend on my turn, and that can be spent in various ways. Energy can be spent for the cost on the cards in the supply to gain that card from the top of one of these supply decks to your discard pile, and that, like I said, is how you upgrade your deck. As soon as a card is purchased from a supply pile, then the next card is immediately turned over. All the supply piles are predetermined sets of cards depending on the card type and how expensive the card is to purchase, but each deck is randomized and shuffled within each of those supplies. So it is balanced in a way to where you're going to see the different types of fuel and technology and weapon cards at the right pace in the game to keep the game balanced, but it is randomized per deck, so you don't know necessarily what's going to be coming up next. The other thing that's really cool that I wanted to mention here with the discard pile and the deck in the game is after you purchase a card, the cards you used to buy the card with, so for example, if I purchase that card, the cards you gained energy with go to your discard pile in any order you would like. And I'll get to why that's very important here in a second. And then the card you purchased then goes onto the top of the discard pile after that, because one of the cool things in Invincible, like I said, it shares the same DNA with Aeon's End, is that you never shuffle your discard pile to form a new deck. So at the end of every turn, you will draw your hand back up to 5 cards. If the draw pile ever runs out of cards, then you just simply flip the discard pile into being your new deck of cards to draw from. So the order you place cards into the discard pile is very important, because that is the exact order that you are going to see them as you are drawing back up into your hand to try to combo the cards the best you can with each turn. So that is how you play fuel cards to gain energy, to purchase cards from the supply, take the card, put it in your discard pile. What else can you do with that energy? Well, as you can see here on the main player board, there are 3 different tracks. You've got your health track, you've got your power track, and you've got your slots track. The health track, it just tracks how much health you have. If you go down to 0, you get knocked out, and then additional bad effects happen to you based on whichever boss you're playing with. So you definitely don't want to get knocked out. If all the players get knocked out in a multiplayer game, then that is one of the ways you can lose the game. The other way you can lose the game is that if the city takes enough damage to get down to 0, then you automatically lose as well. So those are a couple of ways you can lose the game. But like I said, with energy, the power track and the slots track are 2 other tracks you can spend energy on. For the power track, you can spend 2 energy for every 1 movement up on the track. If you eventually power your character all the way up to the highest level of 5 power, then you gain the power-up special ability that is printed on your player board. In Invincible's case, it says, activate during your main phase. You deal 5 damage. If that damage defeated a minion, you can repeat this effect, dealing 1 less damage every time. So it's kind of like a superpower, or kind of like an overpowering effect, that if you do spend enough energy to power up your level all the way to the top, you get a special ability. That's a one-time use during your main phase. The other thing you can spend energy on is this slots track, and this is telling you how many weapons you can equip to your character at one time. You start the game off with only being able to equip 1 card at a time, so you're attacking the enemy very slowly, because like I said, you can only equip 1 weapon at a time to start, so you can't really ramp up and combo with multiple weapons to attack and hit very hard to begin with. But you can spend 3 energy during your main phase at any time, and for every 3 energy you spend, you can increase that track for additional card slots for your weapons above your character. So powering up and also leveling up the amount of weapon slots you have above your character are 2 other ways you can spend energy on, other than just purchasing new cards from the supply. So like I said, the other thing you can do on your turn is equip weapons up to your slots value. So let's say here I had a slots level of 2. I could play up to 2 weapon cards from my hand and slot them above my character there. But like I said, in the beginning of my turn, the very start of the turn is when the weapons can fire off. You cannot decide to attack with them during your turn after that initial step, so these weapons will have to wait until my next turn in order for them to actually attack. Then after you play all the cards and resolve all the effects, and then also play enough energy to do what you want with the energy on your player board and buy new cards from the supply to your discard pile, the last phase is your draw phase, where you can choose to discard cards from your hand if you don't like the rest of your hand, or you can choose to keep the cards in your hand that you have left. So in this example, I do like this weapon card in my hand, so I'll keep it. And you draw back up to 5 cards. So in this case, I've got 1 card in my hand, so I will draw 4 cards for a total of a new 5-card hand. And now my draw pile is empty, so the next time I would draw, then this discard pile flips over back into my draw deck. No shuffling required. So that is how that works there. And then you simply go on to the next turn order card to see whose turn is next. Oh, and in this circumstance, it is the villain's turn. So how a villain's turn is broken down is you simply draw a new card from the villain deck and resolve its effects. So in this one here, the battalion forward, it says place 2 infantry into play or any player loses 2 slots. So if I wanted to lose 2 slots down to 0, that's very detrimental. I don't think I want to do that. So I would choose the top action here to happen that says place 2 infantry into play. Then this card would go to the discard pile. 2 new infantry cards would come into play off of the infantry deck. And then this main Flaxen's special ability won't actually happen until the Flaxen's turn card is flipped over, which would have been the very next turn, and additional rules apply for that. So for example, when this Flaxen's turn order card is drawn, when drawn, the city suffers 1 damage for every infantry in play. There's a total of 4 infantry in play. The city would suffer 4 damage. And then you would take the rest of the villain turn as normal by drawing a new card out of their draw deck and doing the effect that's on that card. When the villain deck runs out, you just reshuffle it to form a new draw pile for the villain, and that is the flow of play. So like I said, when a villain turn order card is drawn, you draw 1 card off of their deck, do the effect or the ability on that card for the villain, but some of these villains, like I said, have a special, unique villain card that they actually do their special ability that's printed on their mat before you draw the card off the top of the villain deck. A couple other things with the game I wanted to mention here real quickly before getting into my initial impressions is, like I said, the city here, so in the first scenario we are playing in Chicago, starts at 27 health, and if it ever gets down to 0, that is one of the ways you can lose the game. But the city also has a special ability power as well. There are certain cards you can purchase from the supply into your deck that when you draw them and play the card, it allows you to power up the city. And if the city ever powers up to its full power, then you can activate the special ability on that card. So for example, Chicago says, activate during any player's main phase, attack with any player's weapon. You may destroy that weapon to have it deal an additional 2 damage and repeat this action once. So as soon as you choose to do that ability, activate during any player's main phase, then the power level goes back down to 0, and then you have to play those cards from your deck again to re-power up the city to be able to do that ability again. And then also, as you can see here, kind of almost off screen, is a big pile of other cards that there are other cards in the game that allow you to trash cards out of your deck or out of your hand from the game forever. So if you want to thin out your deck to draw those more powerful cards more often, then there are really cool cards that allow you to ditch cards from your hand to get those out of the game as well. So the flow of play is really fun, really cool. It's a very difficult game, and it plays really well as a true solo game. So if you are a solo gamer, this game plays fantastic for that. But at 2, 3, 4 players, I can't imagine it would play any differently. It would be just as fun working cooperatively to try to take down the big bad boss. And like I said, with the packets over there that are off screen, you can play through a campaign to unlock additional content for more variability, different bosses you can fight against, and other cards that you can add into these supply decks to make every game feel very unique. So my initial impressions of Invincible, the card game, after just a few times playing solo mode with just the basic setup. And this game is fantastic. It is right up my alley. Like I said in the intro of this video, I love Aeon's End and that whole system. I love the fact that you don't have to shuffle your discard pile. You just flip it over into a new draw pile. I love how you're adding different supply cards into the deck to make your deck feel more powerful. And I love the whole slot system too, which Aeon's End had as well, where you can only play a certain number of weapon cards until you upgrade those slots for additional card plays. So that makes it very tricky and very puzzly. And then also the unique powers on the characters and on the city itself really feel powerful and are very helpful when you can finally pull those off. So that feels very, very rewarding. The one thing, other than the Invincible IP, that I like a little bit better about Invincible than I did about Aeon's End is that these supply decks are not static. These supply decks are pre-formatted for each supply deck to make the game balanced and to see a variable array of different types of cards, but each of the supply decks after you make them are randomly shuffled, so you don't necessarily know what exact card is coming up when, so that keeps it very fresh and exciting, and you just don't know what's going to happen. Whereas in comparison, in in Aeon's End, you do choose random cards that you are going to play for that game, but each of the supply piles for the rest of the game are all the same card in that entire stack. So you can buy multiple versions of the same card in Aeon's End, but whereas in Invincible, these stacks are completely different. And yes, there are some duplicates, but as you can just see here in this supply pile, all the cards are completely different. So you don't know exactly what's going to come up when. And then also the amount of energy that it costs is very well laid out, where some of these decks have very high costing weapons, some of the decks have a lower costing weapon, and they just have a nice balanced structure to the way that the supply decks are set up, but still provide for that random variableness and excitement that comes with purchasing a card and not knowing what's coming up next. The other thing I didn't touch on during the overview that I really like about Invincible, the card game, is that yes, after you beat one type of boss a few times, it might just get a little bit old after a while. But what I really appreciated that the designers of Invincible did, as you can see here on the top-down camera, is they included varying difficulty levels of the big bad boss that you can choose to play against. So if I wanted to play against the Flaxons and I've beat them a few times already, I might want to level it up to their normal level 2 to make them a little bit more difficult, or normal level 3, or normal level 4, or expert. And they even have, on the back here, they have different types of expert levels, 2, 3, 4, and then eventually a nightmare mode if you want to make them almost near impossible. If you feel like you've really mastered the game and you need more of a challenge, I really like that they included all these variable difficulty levels with each of the bosses in the game, or from what I can expect that each of the bosses will have. Like I said, I've only played with the base content, so the Flaxons are the only baddies you can play against to begin the game, but I just love that you can just increase the difficulty by just putting a new tile in front of the main villain card, and it changes the feel and the difficulty of the game completely just by doing that. So there you have it. Those are my initial impressions of Invincible, the card game. I'm not going to give it my overall final rating on a score from 1 to 10 quite yet. I want to get the other members of the Talking Cardboard crew to play this game and get their initial impressions and play the game enough to come back to the table and give a final review of the game at a later date. So stay tuned on the channel for that. I am just excited to open more content. I'm excited to play through the campaign and see what else is coming my way with that, and to play with more characters. I've only played with Invincible the few times I've played the game, so I do want to try out the other player powers as well. And there's just so much variability, so much content to the game, and so many other things to discover that make this game exciting, and one that I'm extremely happy with my purchase to dig into it further. So until next time, you all enjoy your day and have fun gaming.